Hi, welcome to the CFES Brilliant Pathways Live Chat. I'm Elaine Dixon-Cross, and we're delighted to be joined by Rhemi Abrams-Fuller, Senior Assistant Dean of Admissions, Coordinator of Multicultural Programs, and Assistant Softball Coach for Carleton College in Minnesota. Rhemi will be talking about admissions and planning your pathway to college. During the live presentation, you can participate by posting your questions and comments in the chat window, and we'll ask Rhemi for you. Hi, Rhemi.
Hi.
Thanks for joining us today.
Yeah, my pleasure. So I'll just go ahead and kick it off. You stop me if questions pop up. Students,
Sounds good.
Students, I'm thrilled to be chatting with you. I thought it might be pertinent actually for me to start with a little bit of my own background, because that informs a lot of what I do, and it informs actually a lot of what I'm going to talk about, just because this is sort of my lived experience. So I was a first-generation college student many, many years ago. Students, I won't tell you when. My mom was a single parent for most of my upbringing, working 2 or 3 jobs at a time just to kind of make ends meet. I came from a really low-income background. At one point, college seemed like not really a possibility at all, just because the price of college is pretty exorbitant, even many years ago. And it's, many places doubled since I went to school. So I saw a lot of barriers to success. I didn't feel like I had a person to guide me through college, and I had a lot of questions that went unanswered. So I found that my process in getting to college was sort of just mirroring what I saw other people doing. I would sort of mirror what my friends did. And I sort of presented myself the way I thought colleges wanted to see me. And I think that was my biggest mistake in applying to colleges. I was really lucky to be admitted to certain places. And ultimately I ended up at Carlton, which, wound up being a perfect fit for me. And I was really, really blessed to have that happen. But the Rhemi that I presented in college applications was not the real Rhemi. If you've ever seen college brochures, if you've ever seen a college website, we do a really good job of printing lots of smiling faces. We do a really good job of, printing pictures of happy students and, students who don't have a care in the world. And for many of us, that's not our day-to-day lived experience. What I didn't see was students asking questions about how they were going to pay for books. What I didn't see on those college brochures and college websites were students who were, at college and enjoying their classes, but worrying about their families back home, about how families were making ends meet, about who was watching their younger siblings while mom was at work, about who was taking care of grandma who was really sick or maybe immobile, right? So those were the things I didn't see. I saw colleges printing lots of statistics about how their students spend time outside of class, right? And for all their community service work, all of their leadership positions, all of the nonprofits that they had started, right? So I saw all of these really positive things, and I sort of assumed, well, that's what colleges want, so that's what I'm going to present. I was very honest in my application, but I didn't give the full Rhemi, right? I talked about, here's my community service work, and here are the leadership positions I hold. I didn't talk about many of the things that shaped my day-to-day experience. I had about 30 unexcused absences in my senior year. And I would imagine college representatives wondering, why isn't Rhemi going to class? I would wonder that now as a college admissions rep. And it's because we didn't have childcare, right? So when my mom had to go to work, I had to stay home with my siblings. And I was happy to do it, but nobody knew that that's what was happening, right? And that's the sort of information that's really, really important for your college applications. So I sort of stumbled my way through the college search process. And after seeing how poorly I did it, I wrote down some tips that I hope will be helpful to those of you who maybe have a background or parts of your background that are similar to my own. So when we talk about getting to college, I think there's a few important things to keep in mind. The first, I'd encourage all of you to find someone who can assist you with the process. Whether that's a community-based organization, whether that is, some of you might be lucky enough to have a guidance counselor or a college counselor at your high school. Some of you might be at a really big high school. And that was my experience too. My guidance counselor had a caseload of about 400 students. So she knew nothing about me, and that wasn't her fault at all. She just had a lot of students that she was supposed to write letters for, right? So maybe that's not possible for you. There are a lot of online resources. There are a lot of free resources. For those of you who were lucky enough to have parents go to college, your parents can be a terrific resource. Whatever that resource is, find someone who can help you with the process. I'm sure many of you know a lot of the ins and outs about the process, but it's important to acknowledge that you probably don't know everything. And there are people who have been through this or who have helped others through this process that can be super beneficial to you as you're going through it. I'd also encourage you to really embrace your story and be willing to share your story with admissions. A lot of the students that I work with now are really scared to tell their story, and I completely understand that. As someone who also was very, very scared to tell her story, even in college, I didn't really share my story with anybody around me because it was different than a lot of the students that I crossed paths with, especially when you're going to an elite college. Many of us can feel inferior. Many of us can feel like we don't belong. Imposter syndrome is a real thing, right? When you show up to college campuses and you wonder, why am I here? Do I deserve to be here? How did I get in? Did the college make a mistake? The answer is no, right? You're going to end up somewhere terrific. You're going to end up somewhere that you absolutely deserve to be. But before you end up there, you're going to have to submit an application. Your application is really meant to tell the story of who you are. And those stories.
Rhemi, we do have a question, and it goes along with what you're saying right now. From our Adirondack schools, what's more important, a good essay or my grades? And then along with that, so you're encouraging them to tell the truth, tell their real story, not what you think people want to hear, right?
Right. Yep. So it's a balance, right? No matter how compelling your story is, if you're failing all your classes, you're going to have a hard time getting into college, right? Conversely, you could be a straight A student, but if we don't feel like we know who you are in your application, some colleges might be hesitant to admit you, right? So it really is a balance. You've got to do your absolute best in school, and that includes senior year. But a lot of colleges talk about a holistic application process. And I think that's something that can be really advantageous to students from many different backgrounds, right? And what that means, if you're not familiar with that term, yes, we look at your grades, we look at your GPA, we look at your testing, right? But we also look at your letters of recommendation, what your teachers say about you. We look at how you spend your time outside of class. And that doesn't just mean the clubs that you do. That's one of the biggest mistakes I see students make in their application. In that extracurricular section, all they list is stuff they do with school, right? And what we're really looking to understand is how you spend your time. So for those of you that are working 20 hours a week, that's really, really important. So please tell us that. For those of you that are watching your siblings, that's really important. For those of you that are translating things for your parents who might not speak English, that's really, really important. For those of you that maybe English is your second language and you have to spend twice as long on your homework so you don't have time for clubs, please tell us all of that. Our job in admissions is to balance all of that, to create a full picture of you as a student, right? Your grades, your testing, but also who you actually are, what your passions are, what gets you out of bed each morning, how you're going to spend your time on our campus, what you're going to learn while you're here, right? So it very much is a balance. Yeah.
Great, thank you.
Yeah, for sure. So again, as much as you're comfortable, please embrace your story. I know many students are self-conscious about it. And again, I totally get that. I was too for many, many years. It took me a long time to be comfortable with who I was and where I came from. And I think for some of us, shame is a hard thing to deal with. When we're nervous about people judging us for where we come from or what our parents do or don't do, what we can do or can't do. But our job in admissions is not to judge you in a negative sense, right? We're judging your application, but we're not looking to be negative about it. We're looking to really understand who you are. And the more you can share with us, the better. I think students, you sometimes sell yourself short in terms of how awesome you are, right? You think you have to hold 15 leadership positions and cure cancer to be awesome. And that's great if you do those things, but many of you are awesome for your grit, for your determination, for how many hours you spend helping your family. I think so often you don't see the reasons that you're awesome, and we see those reasons, right? So the more honest you can be with us, the better. The third thing I would encourage you to look at when you're figuring out how you're going to try to get to college, please find a college that's going to be a good fit for you. I think it's really easy to apply to colleges that you've heard their name, right? Or apply to colleges that, oh, my friend is applying, so I'm going to apply. I would really encourage you, when you're putting together a list, put together a diverse mix of colleges with a range of sort of academic requirements, but look for schools that you're going to be really happy at. Even if you have a list of safety schools where you think, yeah, I feel pretty good about my chances, you should absolutely love every college on your list and know that you're going to be a good fit, not just academically, but personally, right? Spiritually, mentally, every part of you should be happy and satisfied while you're at a college. Doesn't mean it's going to be perfect. There's good and bad to every college. Doesn't mean it's going to be perfect, but you should be overall happy with the selections that you've made. There are a lot of really good ways to get to know a college. I think we live in a generation where, students, everything happens on your phone, right? So you can peruse a website online. You can follow schools on Twitter. You can look at their Instagram. A lot of schools have virtual tours, and that can be a great way to learn more about the college. If you can visit, that's great. It can be costly to visit a college, so I know that's not always possible. But you can do interviews either on campus. Some of us offer interviews off campus as well, right? So if you live in Boston and you want to check out a school in Las Vegas, see if they have interviews that their alums can do remotely, right? Or see if an admissions officer is traveling to your area. Many of us also host events nationwide, right? So even if it's a college that's not close to your house, we have events in many different states, in many different cities, in many different countries, some of us, right? So do what you can. Look into fly-in programs. If, finances are an issue and you feel like, I can't pay to visit a college, colleges have a lot of money. Right? So see if you can qualify for a travel subsidy program or a fly-in program, anything like that. The better you can get to know a college, the better your fit is going to be when you're sort of making your list, okay?
Rhemi, we have two questions that are that fall in line with what you are talking about. One is kind of funny, from a California school. Is it really cold in?
Yes.
Well, and how do students deal?
How do students deal?
Yeah, and that's kind of like your fit. And then I have another question about paying for college, which you were just talking about.
Oh, sure. So yeah, it's specifically about Carleton. I assume the question about the cold was. Yeah, it's cold here. The wind chill here is like -20 today. So it's really cold. Here's what students often think. One of my roommates at Carleton was from California, Southern California. Students think it's like this all the time. It's not. This is a really cold day, and I'm going to stay inside for a bit. Tomorrow, it's going to be 50 degrees warmer. It's going to be +30. So we see many different, I think, ranges in the weather here. Students at Carleton learn to really embrace all 4 seasons. Winter can be a positive thing, but yeah, once you've done winter in Minnesota, you can do winter just about anywhere.
They figure it out, huh?
Yeah.
And then you were talking about off-campus admissions interviews. Does Carleton do that?
We do, yep. So students, if you're interested in doing an interview, but you can't make it to Northfield, Minnesota, which is totally understandable, we are lucky enough to have alums all over the world who do interviews on our behalf. So if that's something you're interested in, the email address, you can find it on the website, but if you have a pen available, if you just email aar@carleton.edu and ask about it, it's pretty simple to go that route. And again, you can find it on our admissions website, but sometimes websites are difficult to navigate.
Great, thank you.
Yeah,
and
for sure.
The other question from a Florida school is, does Carleton offer non-need-based financial aid? So for students, no. Okay.
We do not. Yep. Financial aid here at Carleton is entirely need-based. Yep.
Okay. Great. Thank you.
Sure. So if questions continue to come up about getting to college, feel free to fire those away. I'm going to transition a little bit into getting through college, because I think a lot of times we spend a lot of time talking about getting to college and oh, great, you got in. That's wonderful. Where are you going? And then you show up and some of us don't know what we're supposed to do, myself included. So when I showed up to Carleton, I'm from Spokane, Washington originally. I took the train from Spokane to Minneapolis. I couldn't afford to fly, and I came on my own because we could afford one train ticket. That's what we could afford. So I took the train about 30 hours to Minnesota, and I got to campus with about $200 in my pocket and had someone tell me books are $300 a term. And I thought, oh, okay. I brought enough money to like get a comforter and like a pair of shower shoes. So now what? So a couple of things that I would recommend for those of you who are, don't have much experience with seeing others maybe show up to college yet. The first thing, find your support network. You've got to have a group of people supporting you. The same way you've got that support network getting to college, you've got to have a group of people supporting you when you go to college and you're actually on the campus. That support network can be advisors on your campus. It can be mentors, faculty, staff, or student mentors. It can be a group of friends, right, that you check in with at least once a week or twice a week. It can be a cultural or a religious group. It can be a counselor, right? Like it can be a physical counselor. It can be someone you chat with about your mental health. It can be a tutor, a study group. Professors have office hours. There are so many different ways to get support on campus, but you've got to be proactive in getting those things. I think many of us show up to campus, and for some of us, pride is the only thing we come with. Pride was the only thing I showed up with at Carleton, right? I had $200 and I had pride, and that was it. And that pride led me to say, I'm not going to ask for help. I'm not going to join any cultural groups because I don't want to be that kid. I don't want to be the kid that got to Carleton because of affirmative action. I don't want to be associated with any of these cultural groups. And again, you live, you learn, you get wiser. I realized that's not why I was here. I realized that's not why any of our students are here. They're here because they're incredible and they deserve to be here. But that pride was all I came with, and I clung to it pretty tightly. It led me to be really afraid to ask questions, right? When there were things I didn't know. Yeah.
So we have a student asking, how do you find the right support group?
That's Monica Rodriguez. That's a really good question. And for some of us, it takes longer than others. I think very often there's this perception that you're going to show up to campus and you're going to find your group of people immediately. And that doesn't always happen. For some students, it takes a term or a full year to find your people, whether those people are your peers or those people are faculty and staff. I would recommend, if you have the chance at your college, get to know your deans, right? They are there to make sure students have the academic support that they need. Ask your advisor what sorts of academic resources exist on your college campus, specifically if you fit into different underrepresented groups, right? So if you're a first-generation college student, ask them specifically, what support systems do you have for first-generation students? What support systems do you have for students from underrepresented religious identities? What support systems do you have for students whose second language or third language or fourth language is English? Be really specific with your questions. And that can be nerve-wracking for some of us, right? Because we don't want to admit weakness. We don't want to appear less than. We don't want to appear like we can't keep up or like we need special services. The truth is we all need that. It's just that we all need different support going through college, right? So finding the support that is best for you and the best fit for you is really important. It's the reason we have those systems on campus and those networks on campus. That's a really great question.
Thanks for that, Monica. Rhemi, and I have to ask, what did you do? You had 3 things to buy and $200. How'd you figure that out?
So I was lucky enough. There's a program called TRIO at Carleton.
Okay.
And yeah, for those of you going to college with TRIO programs, TRIO works specifically with first-generation college students, low-income college students, and students who have a documented disability. And I was really lucky that, for once, I was lucky to be a first-generation low-income college student. And so I qualified for TRIO, which meant that they paid for all of my books. It meant that I had an advisor who was checking in on me at least once a week just to see how things were. It meant that I had access to additional resources through the TRIO house. They loaned me a laptop because Lord knows I could not afford a laptop, right? So I was really, really lucky to get into TRIO. Otherwise, I don't know what I would have done. Quite frankly, I really don't know what I would have done. I ended up taking an additional job off campus, and I know that's a necessity for many of us, sending money home. As much as possible, I encourage students not to do that. And I know for some of us, it's not an option. I get that. I was there. But if you don't absolutely need the money, please focus on your studies. It's really easy to get wrapped up in lots and lots of work outside of class. Your grades can suffer, your mental health can suffer, your physical health can suffer. I know that's not a privilege for all of us to be able to say, oh, I'm just not going to work. So I totally understand that. But if it is possible for you, please limit how much you work outside of class on campus.
Great.
Yeah, for sure. The third thing I'll mention really quickly about getting through college, and you'll hear me reiterate this if you ever talk to me, don't forget that you deserve to be there. Admissions offices don't make mistakes. And there's going to be a time where very likely you're going to question whether you deserve to be there, especially for those of us who carry underrepresented identities with us. There's going to be a time where you question, especially if you're going to a college that's really rigorous, especially if you're in a class where everyone seems to get it and you're having a hard time picking up on it. It's going to be harder than high school was. And again, if you're not familiar with this idea of imposter syndrome, many of us who carry those underrepresented identities struggle with that when we get to a college campus, right? We see majority peers around us who maybe went to stronger schools or have more affluent backgrounds, who just seem to get it a little bit more. You absolutely deserve to be wherever you end up. We, in the college admissions world, not just at Carleton, it is our job to bring in a diverse, eclectic mix of students, all of whom can succeed at our colleges. Doesn't mean everybody's going to get straight A's, but you will not be admitted somewhere where you cannot absolutely succeed, right? So please don't forget that as you go through college. Even though there's going to be some really tough times, you absolutely deserve to be wherever you end up, even if people question that.
Rhemi,
yeah.
Monica has another question. If you have any tips to balance your time between jobs, family, and social life on campus.
It's tough. I get it. It's tough, especially if you're going to a college that's far from your family, and especially if you've never been far from your family. That was, I think, one of the biggest struggles for me when I came to Carleton. Carleton is about 1,400 miles from my family. And, I mentioned it was just my mom and the siblings. And, I have 2 younger siblings. So I took on sort of the parent to role, as I'm sure many of you have. And that was hard. That was one of the hardest days of my life, leaving my little brother specifically. I will never forget that image. I had a really hard time getting on the train. And I had a really hard time some days at Carleton, right? Because you know that just because you're off at college doesn't mean things at home stop. It doesn't mean financial worries stop. It doesn't mean your parents all of a sudden are able to take care of all the chores without your help. It doesn't mean all of a sudden that health problems just stop, right? So I really get that. We're lucky that we live in an age now where technology has come so far, right? And Skype or video chatting, anything like this, texting, anytime you can physically connect, not physically, but virtually connect with your family and they can see your face, it's super helpful. I had a friend here at Carleton. She called every member of her family every day. So she'd call her mom, her dad, her brother, her sister, and her grandparents, sometimes her aunts, her uncles. She was always on the phone with her family because that's what she needed, right? She was also from the West Coast, so she was really, really far from family. And she needed that. That was sort of her emotional rejuvenation, was talking to family and making sure grandma's okay, making sure dad's taking care of stuff, making sure mom's all right. It is a balance, right? It's really tough. And for many of you, it's going to be something you have to take into account, right? Knowing if you leave the state for college, knowing what that's going to mean, right? For some of you, that might mean you should stay close to home. For others, maybe you have the luxury of going a bit further. Maybe it depends on the calendar of the school. If they have more breaks where you can go home, maybe they have a travel program where they'll pay for you to go home once a term or something. But it's really important to take all that into account, right, when you're looking at colleges, because that definitely is a really important part of your experience. Yeah, great question.
Great, thank you. Thanks again, Monica.
Yeah.
So from an educator, they want to know, what are the most popular campus events at Carleton College, and what's your favorite? This is where you get your support group, right?
Yeah. So if you're unfamiliar with Carleton, we are like a huge campus of nerds, and that's why I fit so well here. So all of the traditions here are sort of quirky, weird ones. Rotblat is a pretty big campus tradition. We play an inning of wiffle ball for every year the campus has been in existence, which is 152 this year. So students will be out playing wiffle ball from 4 a.m. all the way until the sun sets. It's not really a sporting activity. It's just kind of a fun way for students to connect. Broom ball is a pretty big thing as well here. It's a cool thing because it's a cold weather thing. So I mentioned it's really cold here right now. We actually flood our quad every winter and we build ice rinks. And students are outside playing broom ball, which is like hockey without skates, kind of. Everyone is equally terrible. So it's the great equalizer among sports. So that's what I'll be doing a bit this winter. There are a lot of different cultural groups on campus. And I have found that as a staff member, looking back on my time at Carleton and realizing all the mistakes I made and not getting involved with those groups, I do a lot of that now. So I get involved with our international life. Our Gender and Sexuality Center has a rainbow retreat every year, and I'll go and I'll chaperone that, not chaperone, support, I guess, that. Our trio group on campus does a lot of programming, so I'll show up to that. It's my pleasure to be on campus and just connect with other students from underrepresented backgrounds. That's my biggest blessing, I think, being back to Carleton, is connecting with other students and seeing them do things better than I did here.
Oh, and you have good advice, so that's great.
Sometimes. I bake a mean chocolate chip cookie, so.
Yummy. We have another question. How do you know what resources are available to you, and how do you use them?
Yeah, a lot of that is just being willing to ask. I heard this a lot as I've gone through admissions. You don't know what you don't know, right? So even when I got to Carleton, I didn't know TRIO was a thing. I didn't know there was an Office of Intercultural International Life. I didn't know there was a Gender and Sexuality Center. I didn't know about all these things, that there were tutors available. Even though I had visited campus, I didn't know about all of this, right? So a lot of it is just you being willing to, one, either put in the work and kind of peruse the website, though sometimes they can be tough to get through. But again, ask the people around you, ask your advisor, ask your dean, ask your professors. You've got to be willing to ask those questions, even though they can be hard and uncomfortable sometimes. Ask them and share a little bit about yourself, right? Because if you say, oh, what resources are there here? You might get a generic list, right? But if you say, hey, I'm a first generation college student, I really want to do some science research, but I have no idea how to go about that. I don't know how I'm going to fund it. Can you point me in the right direction? They're going to be able to give you a much more specific answer, right? So depending on the resources you're looking for, the more context you can give the people you're asking these questions, the better.
Great, thank you.
Yeah.
Thanks again, Monica. Monica has great questions.
So I won't keep you all too long. I did write down a couple of things too about what happens when you're done with college, right? Because again, getting to college is one thing, getting through college is amazing. But I also found when I graduated from Carleton, I sort of thought, well, now what? What do I do? I ended up majoring in Japanese here and knowing I wasn't going to really do anything with that degree for a career. So I thought, well, gosh, now what? A lot of your colleges are going to have resources to help you with life after college as well, right? And again, if you don't know what those are, ask the questions. Many of your colleges are going to have a career center. Many of them will offer job fairs, right? Where they'll bring different companies to campus to come and recruit students. Many colleges will offer internship information, externship information. Some colleges will do mock interviews to help you prepare for the interviews that you're going to have looking at jobs. There's a lot of great resources, but again, a lot of this goes back to you, the student. You have got to prepare as well, right? Just because you got through college doesn't mean you instantly deserve the job that you want. You have got to be prepped. Anytime you apply for a job, anytime you interview, you've got to put in the work, right? So I very often tell students, don't let the reason you don't get a job be because you showed up unprepared, right? So before you show up to that interview, talk to someone and say, hey, can we do this? Can we practice interviewing, right? Because you might have all those ideas in your head, but when you sit down with someone one-on-one, a lot of us get a little bit nervous, right? We forget some of what we want to say. Maybe we present ourselves differently than we thought, right? And it's really good to get that feedback. So be open to the feedback of the people around you and utilize the resources that you have at your disposal.
Rhemi, did you have one person that you were most comfortable with that you went to? How did that, we had another question. How did that relationship develop? Who did you become most comfortable with?
For sure, definitely my TRIO advisor here at Carleton. My TRIO advisor was the only one who really knew anything about my story here. I felt totally comfortable because, again, I didn't realize it at the time, but I had sort of found my people and I felt comfortable at the TRIO house because most of the students were first generation. Most of the students came from low-income backgrounds. So all of a sudden, I found I didn't have to explain why I didn't have North Face boots or boots at all. I didn't have to explain anymore why I don't have a laptop, because these are questions that sort of arose on campus, right? And they're general questions and nobody asks them to be mean, but they get old, right? When you're constantly trying to think of, oh, how do I explain this without saying, my mom's working 3 jobs and can barely make ends meet. That's why I don't have a laptop, right? So they start to wear on you a little bit. And I realized that's why I was okay at the Trio House, because nobody was asking me those questions, you know, because they got it. They understood instantly. I didn't have to explain why I didn't have all these other things. Because you'll find, especially those of you going to really strong colleges, there's a lot of wealth on campus. And that's something that if you haven't been around it before, it can take some getting used to. You know, students can't help that they come from privilege, you know, any more than I could help that I didn't come from it. So you learn to interact with different groups of people. But it goes back to sort of finding the person that you trust with your story. And because Mitchell, my peer advisor, understood my background, you know, I felt comfortable just breaking down to him. Right before I had to declare my major, I lost it, just sobbing. And I was not a crier until I became an adult. So I didn't know how to handle it. And he sort of talked me down. I was like, okay. Like it was great to know that I could just call him bawling and he would get it. He would understand why I was stressed and nervous and freaked out. And he was there, you know. So for other students on campus, I had friends who their person was their sport coach, you know, because they spent so much time with athletics that they trusted their track coach or they trusted their baseball coach or maybe their teammates, you know. So everyone kind of has their different person, but it's got to be someone who is understanding of you as a student and who's, I would say, gentle with your emotions. You know, be intentional about the people that you surround yourself with, and be intentional about the people that you trust with your story. I think it's important to share your story, but you know, make sure the people that are around you are going to be gentle with your emotions too. Yeah.
Great, thank you.
Sure.
You also mentioned that you were studying Japanese, but then you weren't going to do anything with that major. Is that because of employability, or was that an intentional decision?
No, it wasn't really anything. I was sort of aloof as a student. So one of the great things about a liberal arts college is that you can study many different things and want to pursue many different paths. And those paths don't necessarily need to coordinate with your major. So students, for those of I was unfamiliar with liberal arts as a student. And I'll be honest, I still didn't know what liberal arts meant when I deposited at Carleton. And I was really lucky to be able to find out and find a place that ended up being a good fit for me. But for those of you that are unfamiliar with it, liberal arts basically means you're going to be a bit of an all-arounder, right? You might really want to study Chinese, but you also want to study linguistics, and you want to study English and medieval and Renaissance studies and women and gender studies. And you want to look at how all of those things relate, right? You want to be able to bring up what you're learning in psychology in your religion class, and you want to do a marine biology study abroad program, even though you're in the pre-law track, right? You can do all of those things as a liberal arts major. And I was sort of trying to identify what my passion was and what my career would be. And I came into Carleton as a math major, actually, intending to be a math teacher, a high school math teacher. So I minored in education and got a lot of great courses through that, and ended up getting to a point in math where I just couldn't visualize what I was learning anymore. I was doing okay in the class, but I just couldn't see it in my mind. And for me, that was really hard. And I was taking Japanese for my language requirement and found that I was just in love with what I was learning. I was in love with the professors. It just made me really happy. So I knew I probably wasn't ever gonna, you know, do any translating abroad or go work abroad. I just thought, okay, let me see where this takes me. And ended up going to grad school for something totally different, which again is not uncommon for liberal arts majors. So it depends, I think, on the college you go to. If you want a specific track, right, and you want to study chemistry and only chemistry, maybe a research university is a good fit for you. But if you're a student who wants the freedom to study many different things, you might want to look into liberal arts colleges.
So we have another question that just came in. If you want to change your major, how do you do it, and is it easy to do?
At Carleton, it's easy. I think it depends on the school that you're at, because so many research universities, you have a university and you have specific smaller schools under sort of the umbrella of the university, right? So even if you go to the University of Minnesota, you're going to be part of the School of Pharmacy or the School of Literature or the School of Mathematics, right? And because you're going into a certain school or a certain track, if you decide, actually, I want to change my major, it can be tough, especially when you're talking about graduating in 4 years. It can be really tough, and it might actually set you back a little bit. So it depends on the school. It's a little bit different everywhere. Many liberal arts colleges, you decide a little bit later. So if you are a student who's undecided, many liberal arts colleges, you have your first 2 years to kind of try out many different things, and then you declare a major at the end of your sophomore year. So that might be one option to consider. There are also larger universities with like liberal arts programs within them. So that might be a good thing for you to look into. I know some students who have switched a major, as late as junior year and still graduated in 4 years. I know other students at larger universities who switched a major and it meant they had to tack on that additional year to college. So really depends where you end up, I would say.
Right, great, thank you.
Sure. Okay, so we were talking about what you do after college, and one other important piece of advice I would offer to you, students, 5-6 years down the road, don't be afraid to apply to the jobs that excite you. Many times we see a list of requirements and it can be intimidating. Same as colleges, right? You see this list of requirements and you think, oh, that's a lot. That might be, more than I've got, or I don't have this degree, or I don't have this many years experience. Ladies in particular, we are far less likely to apply to jobs if we think we are underqualified. And it turns out many of those requirements are quite flexible, right? So if you really see a job that you're like, this would be perfect for me, I don't have this, but here's why I would be great, I really encourage you to apply to those jobs. And it's important to be realistic about your qualifications, right? If it requires a PhD and you've got a bachelor's, it's probably not a good fit, right? But if they say, it requires 6 years of experience and you have 4.5, but some really relevant experience and some other things on top of that, it's a good thing to try to figure out what you're going to bring to a position rather than why you might be short of what they're looking for. Worst case scenario, you get more opportunities to craft your application, to craft your resume, to craft your letters of recommendation, to work on your interview skills. There's nothing bad that can come out of this, right? You may not get the job, but every time you apply, every time you write a resume, every time you do an interview, you're going to make yourself a little bit better for the next time you apply, right? So don't be afraid to go after those things. Again, I would reiterate, same as when you're applying to colleges and when you're in college, don't let pride stand in the way. Ask questions. I can't tell you how many years I spent sort of nodding along to things because I didn't want people to think, she doesn't know this. Everyone else knows this, but Rhemi doesn't know it, right? So I wouldn't ask questions, right? Ask those questions. You don't know what you don't know, right? So don't be afraid to ask the questions and take help when it's offered to you, right? That is the biggest lesson I've learned in my my adult life. I mentioned pride was the only thing that I had for a really long time. So I clung really, really tightly to it because I didn't want to be perceived as less than. I didn't want to be perceived as sort of a charity case because I'd spent my high school years feeling like that and I was done with it. And I didn't take help when it was offered to me at times. And I was really lucky to end up in the places that I ended up. And I was really lucky that people were watching out for me. But I could have made my life so much easier when people said, hey, Rhemi, can we help you with that? Instead of saying, no, I got it, right? When people offer to help you, say yes. Say, yeah, I would really appreciate that because it's going to make your life so much easier. And we all need help sometimes, and it's totally okay to admit that.
Absolutely.
So that's all I have in terms of what I've prepared for you. Students or educators, are there any final questions that I can answer for you?
I think is that the last of the, we have one more. We have, wait, I'm sorry, I'm losing it. Oh, we answered
this.
Yeah.
Balance.
Oh, okay. Do you recommend, how do you recommend to balance a job and college classes so you get the most out of it? So we kind of had a similar question to that.
Yeah, I think one of the great things about college is you get to kind of set your own schedule. It's really different than high school where you're in class, 7:30 to 3 every day, and then your job has to be sort of after that, right? College is great because you might have class from 8:30 to 10:30 every morning and then nothing on Fridays, right? So if you absolutely have to have a job, find a job that works well with your schedule. If you are a person who starts to fall asleep at 8 p.m., do not take a job that's going to have you working through the evening, right? Or a job that's going to have you working all afternoon, and then you have to do your homework in the evening, right? I made the mistake of taking a job it was great because I could get hours, but I would work from 6 p.m. to 2 a.m., right? And I love a 9 o'clock bedtime. So those hours were tough for me, right? So I'd come home at 2 in the morning, and then I'd wake up at 6:30 for softball practice, and I was dragging, right? Obviously, I was dragging because I'd had 4 hours of sleep. So it was absolutely terrible. If you're a student who is an early riser, work your schedule around that, right? Maybe do early morning classes and then, maybe work in the middle of the afternoon, or maybe you only work on weekends, right? So I would say do your best to try to finagle the schedule that's best for you. Or some of you might be late night people. And if that's the case, don't sign up for that 8 a.m. class. Sign up for that 11 a.m. class so you can sleep in a little bit, right? Do your homework, then go to your job late at night, go to bed at midnight, and then get a solid sleep the night before. I think that's the biggest mistake college students make across the board. Any college you look at, you guys don't get enough sleep. And that's in high school too, right? So finagle your schedule, including your work, academics, extracurriculars, so that it's best for you.
Rhemi, does Carlton do work studies? And maybe you could talk about that just across the board and at college, a work study.
Yeah, for sure. So we do work study. Every student on campus can get a job if they want one, 8 to 10 hours a week. Work study is something that actually made me feel like I sort of fit in here because I sort of felt like only students getting financial aid would be working. And that's only about 55% of the students at Carleton receive financial aid, which means 45% of our students are able to pay these fees. And that sort of blew my mind as a student. And I thought, it's only kids like me who are going to be working, only kids from really poor backgrounds. But it turns out most of our students work. It's almost 90%. So even students who come from pretty affluent backgrounds have a job, which means you can't really tell based on who's working what somebody's background is. And I liked that a lot. And I think many colleges are similar, where a lot of students are going to be working a job just for that extra money, right? Whether it's for pizza or for books, or you're saving up for a laptop, or you want to take a trip to the mall, whatever it is. If you ever have questions about work study, I think financial aid offices usually are a good first stop if you have those questions. For many students, if you are awarded financial aid, your work study is going to come as part of that package. And you don't have to take it. But if you're able to work 8 to 10 hours a week, which I think most colleges think is pretty reasonable, then I would definitely take the job. Just because, again, unexpected expenses will come up while you're in college, right? So again, you don't need to be working 40 hours a week, hopefully. But if you can finagle 8 to 10, I think that's a good place to start. A lot of students think, it's going to be dining hall work. And yeah, for some of you it is. But I found every student actually at the Carleton Dining Hall that I know actually really likes it, right? So don't judge the book before you get to know it. There's a variety of jobs. We have some students working in the library, some students work as athletic trainers. I worked in the Historical Society downtown. Don't know how that worked out, but there's a mix of jobs, right? So don't assume you're going to be working in a dining hall, and don't assume it's going to be bad. You might really like it.
Great, thank you.
Yeah.
So I think that concludes our questions.
Great. Well, thank you for having me.
Thank you, Rhemi. At CFES Brilliant Pathways, we want to say arigato. How did I do?
That was perfect. You nailed it.
Awesome. I think it's the first time I've ever said that. So thank you to everyone that tuned in and for the great questions that you sent. A recording of our live chat will be available on our website. And remember to tune in for our next live chat, February 28th, with Dr. Gregory Threat on goal setting. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.